to thank John for agreeing to come to this festival and taking it international. So, to begin with, I request all of you a big round of applause for John Zubrycki, who has come all the way from Sydney to participate in Koshala Literature Festival.
It's a pleasure, absolute pleasure.
Yeah. And ours, I would say, is still a nascent festival, and we will thrive with the support of authors like you. Thank you so much. As Tushar has already mentioned, that you have 6 books on India. A Shortest History of India, Jaduwalas, The Last Nizam, The House of Jaipur, and if I may be forgetting something, now Dethroned, which is before us. You have been a diplomat, a journalist, and Indian history is intriguing for all the things, all the subjects you've written on. But why this special interest in India, and especially the princely states?
Thank you very much, Amitabh. And look, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. My partner and I, we've just spent the morning exploring Lucknow's bazaars, the Chowk, and going to see the Imambara as well. What a fantastic city you people live in. I'm definitely going to spend more time here. Look, why India? Everybody seems to ask me that. Look, India is a storyteller's dream. I mean, if you were a fiction writer coming to India and you couldn't find any inspiration, you should quit the writing profession. If you're a historian, someone who's interested in narrative non-fiction like I am, and come to India without finding a story that needs to be told, there's something you should go back to, I don't know, back to school and start all over again. That is the essence of India for me. I think even this time I arrived in Bombay 3 weeks ago. The following day, I caught up for a coffee with a friend of mine. We discussed an idea for a book, completely new topic. It happens every time I come to India. I just stumble across these stories that are just waiting to be told. My fascination, though, goes back to my university days when I studied Indian history in Hindi with the eminent A.L. Basham. I don't know if any of you know him. He wrote The Wonder That Was India. And he was certainly a very inspirational teacher, and I think it's thanks to him that I'm sitting here right now. And you know, I hope I'll be coming back to this country many, many times again, because I've got many book projects in the pipeline.
Yeah, it's working now. So you mentioned A.L. Basham. Who hasn't heard or read of A.L. Basham, The Wonder That Was India? And you just mentioned that you read history in Hindi.
And Hindi, not in Hindi.
And Hindi. Because I was going to ask you my next question in Hindi and request you to कि आप हिंदी में बात करें.
No.
So everybody knows about the role of Sardar Patel in the integration of the princely states. The number is perhaps 550.
562. Oh, 550 that found themselves within
somewhere around that.
Yeah.
But not many know of the role of Menon and his humble beginnings. Could you highlight Menon's role?
That's right. When you mention the name Menon, I think most people think of Krishna Menon, who went on to be India's first High Commissioner in London, if I'm not mistaken. No, VP Menon, it is an extraordinary story. Here is a man who was born in Kerala. He ran away from home at about the age of 15 after he set fire to his school because the headmaster was such a bully. He kept castigating him for being late to school because he had so far to walk from his home. He catches the first train passing through the station. He doesn't know where it's going. It's going to the Kolar goldfields near Bangalore. And what does he do? He works as a coolie in the gold mines of Kolar, earning 2 annas a day, and does this for a few years. One of the English managers at the coal mine realizes or recognizes the fact that this is a boy who's got some talent and shouldn't be, taking on this sort of this lowly role. So he gives him a break. He elevates him to a senior position. After that, Menon has many of these fortuitous encounters with people at the right time, until finally in about 1930 he joins. Back in the early 20s he joins the Reforms Commission. By 1939 he is the senior most Indian in the British Raj, as working as the Reforms Commissioner. So this is an incredible meteoric rise for someone who does not have, he's not, unlike Jinnah, Patel, Nehru, who've all studied at the bar, have law degrees, etc. He has, he's worked his way up just by sheer grit and chutzpah to the top position in the Raj, in the Reforms Commission. And then he we can go on to it, because he then plays this very important role in devising a formula to get the states to accede to India.
So as it is said that life gives you just one chance, Menon here got more than one, perhaps 5 or 6 chances in life, to lose everything and then come back.
Yeah.
So that I would say is his sheer resilience.
That's right.
That
there was an incident where he arrived in Bombay after a 36-hour train ride, I think, from Bangalore, falls asleep on the steps of church gates of Victoria Terminus, as it was known then, wakes up and somebody has stolen his wallet. He's got no money. A fellow Malalai takes pity on him. He sells towels in the bazaars of Bombay to make ends meet. It's an incredible story.
Usually when we read our history books, generally history is considered a boring subject, very dry. And when it is not dry, then it becomes something like what Diwan Jarmani Das wrote. Perhaps you may have read his books, The Maharajas and the Maharanis. Or, without naming anyone, there are authors who've written history like screenplay history. Here we have John sitting amongst us, who has written very interesting accounts, and yet he has not digressed from the facts. And very interestingly, you have drawn this comparison when it comes to the integration of the states in these 3 major states: Kashmir, Hyderabad, and Junagadh. Everyone knows the story of Hyderabad. Kashmir is still an intriguing story. Tell us a bit about Junagadh, the Nawab, and compare it to Kashmir.
Okay. Junagadh was a state, I'm sure all of you know, in what is now Gujarat, on the southern coast. It contains the Somnath temple, Girnar, a mountain that is sacred to Hindus and Jains, the Gir forest, which of course has India's only lion population. Each of the states, let me just give you a bit of context first. There were 562 of these states within the borders of British India before partition. About 550 went to India, the remainder were in Pakistan. But they were scattered all over the country. And each of these states was given the option of either joining India or Pakistan or remaining independent. Because on the transfer of power, all the treaties that bound these states to the crown would lapse. This presented a huge challenge for Patel, Menon, and Mountbatten, and Nehru, the architects of India's independence. And they only had 3 weeks in which to convince all these states to sign on the dotted line, saying we will accede to India. As we know, Kashmir and Hyderabad were 2 that didn't, and Junagadh was one that everybody expected to, because here was a Muslim-ruled state, but with a Hindu majority population. About 85% of the population was Hindu. It was separated from Pakistan, by, I think it was 300 nautical miles of sea, the Diwan of Gujarat had previously told Nehru that yes, his state would accede. That was the desire of Nawab Mahabat Khan, the ruler of Junagadh. However, enter Shah Nawaz Bhutto, who sort of takes over the Diwanship, the prime ministership, in June 1947, while Mahabat Khan is off in England. And Shah Nawaz Bhutto is the father of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Also has a lot of land holdings in Sindh. So he is the one who sees it in his own interests and thinks it's in the interests of Junagadh to accede to Pakistan, which is Junagadh's legal right. Now, August the 15th comes and goes, and there is no instrument of accession that the Nawab has signed. Instead, Nehru and Mountbatten and Patel find out to their dismay through a press release that Junagadh has decided to accede to Pakistan. Now, this accession is not immediately recognized by Pakistan. I think Jinnah would have been probably horrified by the prospect of having to deal with this crisis at a time when, you know, you've got this nascent state, you've got millions, hundreds of thousands of people being butchered on the borders. You've got a crisis brewing in Kashmir. And it takes a month for Jinnah to finally say, yes, we accept the accession of Junagadh to Pakistan. Of course, particularly for Patel, this is anathema, because Patel being a Gujarati, and also he sees it as a challenge, a threat to India's sustainability. This is also, India has gone through this tremendously fraught process of getting to the point where it can become a nation state. And if you have states like Junagadh suddenly exercising their right to independence or accession to Pakistan, all decades of nationalist struggle could just go up in smoke. So, you know, and Mahabat Khan is an interesting ruler. I mean, most people associate him with his love of dogs. He had kennels full of thousands of dogs, and when his two favorite hounds got married, he bought diamond-studded collars for them and spent, you know, lakhs of rupees on their wedding. But he was also a ruler who I don't think really understood the implications of what he was doing, and I think he was being pushed by Shah Nawaz Bhutto into acceding to Pakistan. India, and there, what happens is you have an interesting situation developing, because Patel would like India to intervene militarily. To do so, however, would be to intervene in what is essentially a sovereign state, which could spark a war between India and Pakistan. Nehru is against it. You know, he wants to stick to the letter of the law and, you know, use other means of persuasion to make Mahabat Khan change his mind. Finally, and the problem is that if Junagadh goes to Pakistan, what's to stop Kashmir, a state with a Hindu ruler and a Muslim majority, going to Pakistan as well? And indeed, what is to stop Hyderabad, another Muslim-ruled state, declaring its independence, which it also has the right to do? So, I mean, to cut a story short, Patel wins out. India amasses troops on the border of Junagadh. There's the argument being we need a show of force because Junagadh has been arming itself. Pakistani agents have infiltrated the state. They've intercepted ships carrying arms. When the Indian army does enter Junagadh, they do so without a shot being fired. And when they open the armory, they find a few dozen rusty muskets. That is the extent of Junagadh's army, basically. And then the other side of the story is, of course, that Nehru agrees that there should be a plebiscite to decide to decide the future of Junagadh. This is something that horrifies Patel, because he realizes that if India agrees to Pakistan's demand for a plebiscite, that India will also have to agree to a plebiscite on Kashmir's future, where a majority Muslim population would almost certainly vote to join Pakistan. So the plebiscite is held, I think out of maybe, I think there was 30 or 40,000 votes cast. There was only about 100 cast in favor of acceding to Pakistan. All the other votes were to stay with India. But if you look at a map of Pakistan today, an official map, it still shows Junagadh as being part of Pakistan. And so as far as Pakistan's concerned, Junagadh's India has broken international law by absorbing Junagadh back into the Indian state.
And not many of us know that the Junagadh question is still hanging in the UN, unresolved.
Yeah, unresolved.
Also, give us a bit of a perspective on the eccentric Nawab of Junagadh, Mahavat Khan, and his lineage.
Yes. Look, he is, as I said, he had this mania for keeping dogs, and the story is that when his plane was taking off from Junagadh airport, when he realized that his days were numbered, Indian troops were massing on the border, and he'd obviously lost the support of the vast majority of people in the state, and there was communal violence starting to erupt. So he emptied the treasury, took several of his wives and as many of his dogs as he could fit into his private, I think he had a Dakota or something like that, plane, and took off, and was about to take off from Junagadh airport when one of his wives said, "Oh dear, I've forgotten my daughter. She's back in the palace. Just wait for me. I'll be back in a second." Instead of waiting for her, he loaded as many more dogs as he could onto the plane and took off. It's a sad story, because he expected when he got to Pakistan that he would be, welcomed and elevated and given a role in Pakistan society, politics. He was pretty much ignored. But the thing is, you read these historical accounts, and I must say that in my telling of the story, Mahabat Khan does come across as an eccentric. But when I was in Bombay about 3 weeks ago, I met somebody, a 90-year-old Goan gentleman whose father had been the Surgeon General in Junagadh at the time of partition. And this man who I met remembers, he grew up in Junagadh, and he remembers Mahabat Khan driving around Junagadh, not in a Rolls Royce, but in a Hillman convertible. So Hillmans are probably, I don't know, it's like a Suzuki, Maruti Suzuki, not in those days. The windows would be up, but there'd be little curtains, so there'd be a bit of privacy. And he would drive around the city very, very slowly with this pack of dogs following along on their own. So it's a different sort of picture. You get a picture of a very shy ruler, but also a ruler who would wander the bazaars of Junagadh at night incognito to take the pulse of the people in the state. And he did a lot for the state too. He did promote education. It's thanks to his efforts as a conservationist that we still have lions in Junagadh State Forest, because like most Indian rulers, they love to shoot anything that had 4 legs and stripes or a mane or something like that. So he's a little bit maligned by historians. I'd only heard this story about this other side of him, as I said, about 3 weeks ago, and I feel like I haven't quite done him justice in this book.
Yeah, so that completes the whole perspective on the Nawab of Junagadh, Mahabat Khan. He was not only somebody who would spend 3 lakhs on the wedding of one of his female dogs, but he was also a philanthropist and a ruler who would take care of his people well. I was reading your book, and there is a reference of Alex von Tunzelmann and her book An Indian Summer, perhaps in the references, bibliography, or in the main text. And when I read her book, the picture of Louis Mountbatten, which she has painted in her book, is that of a man who is a playboy, who was not concerned with how he would come and do his job. Whereas you have portrayed Mountbatten as a very strong administrator, a very strong viceroy. So please throw some light on that.
Look, he was. I mean, but I think the point I wanted to make about Mountbatten in the book is that when he was selected to be viceroy, he was summoned to Buckingham Palace by his cousin King George V, and he was told, "You have to look after our most loyal allies, the princely states," because they were. I mean, these were the states that in 1857. Were the breakwaters in the storm, as Lord Canning, the first viceroy, said, that would have otherwise swept us away during the uprising. It was states like Hyderabad, Rampur, some of the other central Indian states that put down the mutinous elements in their states. Certainly Hyderabad was the crucial one. Had it not been for Hyderabad, it's likely, I mean, you can only speculate on this sort of stuff, that this rebellion would have swept southwards and perhaps engulfed larger parts of India. The states were Britain's most loyal allies, and certainly King George V did not want them to be given the raw deal. Here was Congress led by Nehru, who despised the princes. Patel as well, although he was more diplomatic in his engagement with them and in the language that he used. And Mountbatten knew many of the princes personally. Sawai Man Singh of Jaipur, Hamidullah Khan of Bhopal. He'd played polo with Jaipur and Bhopal. These are among his best friends, and the princes were looking up to him, as someone who, being of royal blood, would protect their interests. I mean, that they were like rabbits in the gun sights of Congress at that time, tied up and ready to be eliminated. And some, of course, knew that their only future lay in joining India, in democratizing their states, in introducing efficient administrations. But I think the vast majority just didn't know what to do and had no sort of feeling for the tumultuous events that were about to happen. But the problem with Mountbatten, he was a resolute leader, but he was these other things that Tunzelman and other historians talk about, and he was, being a playboy and not being particularly, he'd been to India a few times, but I don't think he really understood the complexities of the tasks in front of him. And instead of taking King George V's advice to heart, he actually ignored the problem of what to do about the princely states until June of 1947, after he had brought the date for the transfer of power forward by 10 months. And it was only, I think, on about June the 13th that he convened a meeting with Patel, Jinnah, Nehru, and a gentleman called Conrad Caulfield, who headed the political department which dealt with the princes, to discuss what to do next. And the result of that meeting was to form a States Department headed by Patel and Menon. Then it was left to Menon to come up with a formula to give to this, an instrument of accession that these leaders would have to sign to sign over defense, communications and foreign policy to the Indian state. Otherwise their internal affairs would be left untouched. And it was only on the 25th of July, just 3 weeks to go before independence, that he convened a meeting of the Chamber of Princes to tell them that you have to sign these instruments, join India, or your days are basically numbered. So yes, I mean, Nehru certainly took up this problem of what to do about the states far too late. And it was more, I think, thanks to the efforts of Patel and Menon, particularly Patel, that they managed to do what seemed like something that was absolutely impossible, to get the vast majority of these states to sign their independence away, basically.
See on your watch that we have about 14 minutes to go. I'll ask you one quick question and one which is a little longer, perhaps for you to answer, and then we'll open the house to the audience. One is, please elaborate a bit on Plan Balkan, and why do you feel that Mountbatten was almost certain that Nehru is going to accept it?
Plan Balkan would have seen the provinces given the choice of whether to to decide their own future, and for the princely states as well. And that's why it was called Plan Balkan, because basically, had it gone through, you would have had India balkanized. It was Menon who came up with the plan for a division of India, a partition of India into two dominions, India and Pakistan, saving probably Menon his own skin. I mean, it's quite likely he would not have survived as viceroy because Nehru, of course, when he heard of Plan Balkan, was just shocked, erupted in anger and said, there's no way we're going to accept this. Which was something that, again, I think, Mountbatten was, I think, a little bit naive in thinking that this was going to be acceptable, but he was also, India was starting to burn, basically. Communal violence was breaking out. Jinnah was, demanding Pakistan, he looked like India was going to erupt in bloodshed and come up with a very uncertain future.
Which happened anyway. But Menon saved the day for Mountbatten, an Indian civil servant.
Yes.
Now, the last question to you is that the promises that were made to the princess, also, they were already getting a very shoddy treatment from Mountbatten and also Patel. As soon as the Indian National Congress leaders got to know that now the British are going to leave India, and they had already begun to make plans to how to take over princely India. So, what do you have to say on the promises that were made to the princes? And what was responsible for subsequent leaders or heads of states in India to not keep those promises, like abolition of titles, abolition of privy purses, and so on?
Yeah. So, on the 16th of August 1947, you had you had an independent India, but you also had these islands of autocracy. The princes were guaranteed that they could continue to look after, that their internal affairs would not be touched. In fact, they, if they did not want to accept the constitution, which had of course not yet been written, it was up to them not to do so. So, Menon and Patel realized very quickly that that this just was never going to work. I mean, you had some of these states were so small, I think smaller than the grounds of this magnificent school, with populations sometimes numbering just in the dozens, hundreds, or thousands. There was no way that you could form efficient administrations, introduce some sort of democratic form of governance, or anything like this. So their plan, which meant that within a few months within 6 months after independence, starting to tear up these instruments of accession that the princes had signed, in order to integrate them to merge them into larger units or integrate them with existing provinces. They started the process in Orissa and Chhattisgarh, moved to Gujarat, then worked on the central Indian states. You had the Matsya Union, which later became Madhya Pradesh. In Rajasthan, they gradually got the larger states to agree to merge together, until finally it was only Jaipur that had held out. These states like Jaipur, Baroda, Mysore, Nawanagar, some of the larger, better administered states that had joined the Constituent Assembly before August 1915, August 15, 1947, they were promised that they would remain units in their own right. You would always have a state of Jaipur, even though you might have a Rajasthan surrounding it or something like that. Indore, Bhopal, these were all promised that they would remain as independent, as states in their own right. That was a promise that was broken. So by 1949, I think end of 49, you only had 3 states that were still recognizable within their original boundaries, which was Mysore, Hyderabad, and Kashmir. So look, to Patel's credit, and the quid pro quo for these states was, if you integrate or merge into larger units, yes, you will lose your internal independence, but you will get in return privileges and privy purses, depending on how big your state is. You will be able to fly your flags, you'll be able to import your Rolls Royces, you can still have birthdays, public holidays on your ruler's birthday. The ruler might be made a Raj Pramukh, which is like the equivalent of a governor. So these were this was the quid pro quo. Now this arrangement lasted, and I'll be very quick, until 1971, when Indira Gandhi, of course, abolished the privy purses, which by rulers today, she is very much seen as the villain in this process, because that was the ultimate betrayal. These, these privileges and privy purses were enshrined in the constitution. So, the rulers thought that they would, continue to enjoy these perks until forever. So, I mean, but a lot of these rulers entered politics. Indira Gandhi increasingly saw them as a threat. If you were a party and had a princely candidate running for your party, you had an 80% chance of that candidate being elected. So, here's Indira Gandhi, after first term in office, Congress suffers a devastating, not defeat, but the worst electoral performance ever. Who are the scapegoats? The princely states.
Nehruvian socialism.
Oh yeah, totally as well. Yeah.
So now I would like to open the house to the audience, and please raise your hands if you want to ask any questions. There, Satya Saran.
What a lovely session. Thank you. John, I want to ask you, tell me where you get all these wonderful details. How do you do your research?
Researching the book like this is the most enjoyable part. It's looking through archives, coming across snippets of information that perhaps other authors haven't picked up, other historians haven't picked up, tying together all the threads of the story. I mean, it was a difficult book to write. There's a lot of you've got to get your head around some of the legalities that were involved. There are, of course, very, big personalities with big egos. You want to go into their lives, their motives, and so on. I like to take a biographical approach as far as I can when I'm telling history. But there is archival research was my main, and that's archives in the UK and in India. Interestingly enough, there's something called the decimal files, which the US State Department put out. These are accessible online. So America's ambassador or deputy head of mission in Delhi would constantly be meeting with Nehru, Patel, Menon, the rulers of these princely states as well. And in those meetings, these people would be speaking much more frankly than they would in public, or even later in their own memoirs, or in their in the correspondence that you can read as well. And so these are really great source of information on what was happening, particularly around the time of independence and in the immediate aftermath. And then, of course, there's Sardar Patel's correspondences online. The Jinnah papers are accessible. Nehru's speeches and statements and correspondence is all there. Mountbatten papers are another important source for me. So yeah, there's plenty there to put the story together. Oh, there's another lady at the back there.
Yeah. That's Richa Mukherjee. She's a speaker. She has a session tomorrow.
Good.
Hi, thank you for this wonderful session. Even though what you've written about largely, it's on your research, it's based on research and historical facts. It is eventually about people and things that happened, and a lot of research is filtered through, a person's prism of, they see the world through their own perspectives. So when you are writing it all down and you're presenting your particular perspective and not just facts, did you have to force yourself to remain neutral at some point in time and not have a point of view, because it's difficult to do that?
Yeah. Look, it is difficult to do that, and it's interesting to you do say that you're getting information directly from the like VP Menon. He wrote a book on the integration of the princely states, which became the sort of the standard text or the final word on what happened. Yet VP Menon also, just before he died, which was I think in 1971, 1972, he was interviewed by H.V. Hodgson, who had been the Reforms Commissioner under Linlithgow and had recommended Menon for the job. So these two men were very close and remained close. Those tape recordings are at London University, and in them Menon gives a very different sort of perspective on the integration process than he does in his book. I think he's looking back. He's being much more candid. He's talking to one of his best friends, but he knows that he's not going to be alive for much longer. So if you look at those, you'll get a different perspective. I myself, I felt. It would be wrong to say I felt a sympathy for the princes, because a lot of them did not deserve any sympathy at all. But there were some very, very good rulers. Krishna Rajawadi of Mysore, for instance, Sayajji Rao in Baroda, and many others who were, enlightened, progressive. Rulers who wanted to modernize their states. They had working for them some of India's brightest civil servants. You think of Mirza Ismail, who was in Mysore and then went to Jaipur, Madhav Rao, who was in Baroda, and so on. In fact, it was seen that, as an Indian, you could rise to the top in a princely state. In the administration, which is something you couldn't do in British India. So it attracted some of these states, the better run states, attracted some of the best talent. So I mean, and Congress also, it said, let's leave the. We're running out of time. No. Let's leave the question of what's going to happen to these princes to the people of the states.
In fact, we have more time.
We
the
have
other speaker is on his way.
Oh, the other speaker's on the way. Hey, great. Okay. So, and so I did have a certain sympathy for, some of these princes, and I did feel that very much promises were broken very quickly. There was Patel said that this was a bloodless revolution. He said that in 1949. It was anything but bloodless. We only have to think about Hyderabad and the upwards of 25,000, probably more like 50,000 people who were massacred there, Muslims mainly. And it was a messy affair as well. You had the rulers of Alwar and Bharatpur carrying out pogroms against the Muslim populations in those states. You had the Rajput states. Many of them were against acceding to India. The Rajputs did not like Congress, and there was a little bit. Patel was very worried that the Rajput states might form a federation and move en masse towards Pakistan. You had Travancore also declaring that it was going to become an independent state. Bhopal was another one. It was a really, really messy affair. Not the sort of smooth run that you read about, and certainly not the bloodless revolution that Patel writes about. So I did feel a certain sympathy for the princes. I thought that there was an element of betrayal, and that betrayal started quite soon. The ultimate betrayal being in 1971, when the privy purses were abolished. But it's in terms. But I try and put a neutral, of course, spin on things. So I try and present it in the most neutral way I can. So if that's answered your question, I hope.
And I have just learned that the next speaker, Saurabh Dwivedi from London Top, is already here. So we will not take any more of his time. Thank you very much, John. John would be available to you to sign his books. I was going to take the privilege of having his book signed over here, privilege of a moderator, and then move on.
With pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, both of you. And while John signs this copy, you all can get your copies right over there outside the Universal Bookstall. John would be signing his book over there. And to felicitate John Zubrycki, may I call on the dais Major Ashish Kumar. He's a regional head of Yes Bank, 17 years in banking, ex-army man. Thank you for your service. Served in Kashmir as well. Ladies and gentlemen, huge round of applause for Major Ashish Kumar. Major Ashish Kumar presenting the memento to John Zubrycki. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, John, for making Koshala Literature Festival an international one this time, only in the second edition itself. Okay, meanwhile, Amitabh sir, thank you very much. This is brilliant. This entire thing that you've given us 2 times in a row, and this is going to be huge. It still is big. It's going to be huge in the coming years. And that's the shawl that we're talking about. The stole from Kumaon, courtesy Mr. Amitabh Singh Baghel, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, the festival director of Koshala Literature Festival. Thank you so much. A shawl on top of another one. Thank you so much, Major Ashish Kumar. Thank you so much, John Zubrycki. And of course, thank you so much, Amitabh sir. And now, a picture? Sure. Before moving ahead, note of thanks to our sponsors. This is Koshala Literature Festival, 2nd edition, day 2. Thank you very much to our sponsors, Ashpra, IFCO, BFC Softtech, BFC Publications, Goodrick Tea, Uttar Pradesh Tourism, Stay Wealthy, Hospitality Partner, Centrum the Hotel, Associate Partner, Yes Bank,